Hey everyone, this is Aaron from Filmin 5D. I just wanted to do a quick, under hopefully 10-minute tutorial on some of the new features that came with Premiere Pro CC 2015, which is what I'm using right here. I talked a little bit about this more in depth on my show, but I kind of wanted to show some examples that would work better in a closed setting, I guess. So the first one, kind of one of the more popular ones, is the Morph Cut. So I have a shot right here from some green screen footage from an episode a couple of years ago, and let me just play this. And this is basically going to be a jump cut because I basically took the better end of the first shot essentially. So you can see a little bit of a jump cut there, and this is very popular on YouTube. You see this a lot. So what a lot of people do nowadays is they go ahead and they punch in, and this actually was not shot in 4K resolution, so it's going to be a lower resolution, so you can't really pull it off. But this is essentially, that's what people do nowadays to kind of cover up, including myself, including for work. Occasionally you can get away with a crossfade, and I'll show you that right now. If you look closely at this one, let me go ahead and bring this full screen. Let me put this full resolution too. Hopefully my computer doesn't lag too much. So you can see a little bit of a crossfade there going on, and it's not super obvious, and it's probably a little bit better than a jump cut, but it's still not the most reasonable cut. So now the morph cut, what it essentially does is it digitizes it and kind of morphs your face to match a previous cut. I'm going to show you that right here, right now, and it's going to probably lag a little bit, but let me go ahead and try to play it. Yeah, definitely lag. Let me go ahead and step through that step by step. So you can't even see the cut here. I mean, it does a really good job. There's one, you can tell I moved forward a little bit, but it's definitely not as jarring as a jump cut, and not as noticeable as a crossfade, because basically you don't want people to notice that you're making a mistake essentially. So I think this does a pretty good job, especially with green screen footage where there's not too much changing in the background. Unfortunately my computer's not good enough to play this full speed. But moving on, that was just one of the quick things that they added. I'm sure it'll get better over time. One note though, I found this out today while I was working on a project. Unlike a crossfade, the morph cut does not transfer to After Effects. So if you're going to go ahead and key your footage in After Effects using this method, dynamic linking, it will not know that that was a morph cut. And I spent an hour today at work fixing, a bunch of morph cuts I had put in that basically turned into jump cuts. So just keep note of that. Keep that in mind. All right, so I have two kind of shots here from old sketches that I wanted to take a look at with the new lumetri effect. And the lumetri effect you can find right here. It's just something you can add. It has basically all the color correction, grading, vignetting, everything you need in one tool, which is really awesome and nice if you don't really want to use speed grade or After Effects and you don't want a dynamic link and all that stuff. So this is a good option. But before I get to that, one of the new things I added, and I mentioned this on my show, is before you had your workspaces, you can get in here, you can customize them, and you can switch between the different ones. They've made it a little bit easier now. As you can see up here at the top, you can actually just quickly click through them much easier, which before honestly, I always would stay with the same one because I was too lazy to kind of go in here and then, select one. But now that you can come in and customize the ones on here and just quickly, like let's say I want to color grade, I'm going to show you guys some color grading right now. I go ahead and click on this, and if I click on the master, I'm actually going to take it off the master real quick. I'm going to do this on just the basic. I talked about this on the podcast that you can have it on the master or just the clip. We're going to go with just the clip for now. So getting into lumetri. So Adobe, they really want you to kind of go from top to bottom. The basic color correction is what you'd find in a camera raw setting. It's basically exact same. I'm sure this works with raw footage too, and I think it'd be really good with raw footage. This input load right here is what you're going to use for, like if you're using S-Log 2 like I am on the Sony, you're going to put that in there and it's going to kind of change the color space. The Canon, I think, let's see if this one, so this is going to change it to try to give you the most dynamic range in the color space. We're going to actually work with none just because I'm not sure what profile this was shot on. Does it look too flat to me? So just stepping through, I'm just going to quickly kind of grade / color correct this. I'm going to go ahead and cool this down. And the point is that all these features are in the same tool, same effect, and you don't have to go around and stack effects on effects. Just a quick note, for the basic color correction, what I do in here is I don't worry about the tint in here. I do my warm to cool to warm, my temperature. I do my exposure, so I just bumped it up 0.2. I don't worry about the highlights and the shadows too much unless I'm working with raw footage and I'm trying to recover. Like, let's say I want to recover these shadows. I might bump those up a little bit. But I'm actually going to show you guys a different method to do that later. I do add a little bit of contrast using, let's say I want to maybe bump up the whites and maybe crush the backs a little bit. And then also one quick note, auto is a pretty good option. If you just click auto, it'll kind of give you a start. And I can undo that, and I can start from there. Actually, we'll go ahead and work with the auto and see how it turns out. You can also add saturation here if you want. I prefer to do it in the next step. But before I get to the next step, let's click over on the scopes right here. And if you don't see these, I believe you can find them right here, lumetri scopes. And this current setup I have right now is actually a preset that you can have. Obviously, it's got the vector scope, so you can see your white balance. It's got the RGB parade, and it's got the waveform. The waveform is really nice for exposure. It's kind of a, I'm getting used to it with my Shogun. It's a little bit of a easier representation, or I guess more graphical representation of a histogram, which a histogram obviously is that. So I like this setup. This is my personal setup. That way I could see if this makes it really easy to balance shots in a given scene, which is basically what you're doing when you're color correcting. Having said that, let's go ahead and move on. And the creative, I'm going to go ahead and I'll touch on it a little bit right now. But basically, this is where you get your looks if you want to use it. I actually do a little bit of sharpening here. Go ahead and sharpen this just 20. And when you're sharpening, make sure that you're at 100%, so you can really see the look of it. Obviously, if I go down, it's going to really defocus it. If I go up, it's going to make it sharper. Of course, this is 5D footage, so it's probably just going to be all soft anyway, so it doesn't really, not really affecting very much. Go back to fit. So here you also have saturation, and the reason I saturate here is because I get to use the saturation. This is kind of a Photoshop thing. Before Photoshop has a new vibrance adjustment layer that they released in, I believe, CS6, and that basically has vibrance and saturation. And what that does is, normally if I just had saturation, I was making a movie, I'd probably bump it down a little bit just to kind of see a little bit more of a filmic look with less saturation. But actually, if I'm using vibrance, I can use a combination of them. So let's say I want, I kind of want a little more color, but then I don't like the skin being super orange. Let me pull it back a little bit with the vibrance, and then we go ahead and turn this on and off. And by the way, this is me turning off just the one layer on and off. If I hit 0, I have it hotkeyed to turn off everything. And you can see on the left side, it's also affecting. So, and another quick thing is, as you're playing through, I'm going to go ahead and loop this. You can see it changing. Obviously, my computer. Let me put it on a lower. You can see the histogram actively updating over here, which is very nice. You can see obviously the shadows getting crushed, and you can see if we're getting any clipping. We are, as his forehead gets into the light, we get a little bit of pure white. So it's just nice to know that. So if you kind of want that effect, that you at least know that it's going on and it's not just random. Yeah, so I use a combination of vibrance and saturation. I find that it works kind of like brightness and contrast, where if you raise one, you want to lower the other. So if I lowered saturation, I'd raise the vibrance a little bit. And this gets a little funky right there, but just something to think about. And then moving down to curves, this is where I like to really get my contrast. So I'm not going to do an S curve or anything like that because it's already pretty contrasty. What I do want to do a little bit though is bring up the shadows, and just the shadows just a little bit. you're starting to see some noise in here, so you got to be really careful with it. But just right there, I want to see a little bit of detail back in his face. I don't want it to be super black. And if you wanted it to be super black, then you could just go the other way with it. And I think curves is just a really good option. But what's special about lumetri is that it actually gives you a hue and saturation curve. So let's say, there's not too many colors going on in this shot right now, but let's say I wanted to mess with the skin tones. I'm going to go ahead and add a yellow and a red, and I'm going to, if I pull these up, it'll bump up the saturation. You can see that getting affected right there in the forehead. Or if I want it to desaturate it, I can do that. And so I can isolate a color without affecting the rest of the shot, and it's really awesome. And you can add any points you want, and it's just a very natural way to kind of, the roll off is very nice, both in curves, because you see the roll off right here, and in a hue saturation curve. This nice little roll off you get where you're not super clipping stuff. And then last but not least for this part, we have the color wheels, and these are I mentioned on my podcast that these remind me a lot of Colorista 2, which I used to use a couple of years ago. In that, you get the nice color wheels, but you also get to have fine control over the brightness. So here's another place where you can kind of go in and raise the shadows. I personally prefer curves because, like I said, the roll off is going to be a lot nicer. Whereas if you're using color wheels, it's only going to affect the shadows, only going to affect the midtones. There's no roll off there. If I bring this up, it's going to see how it's kind of affecting the rest of the shot as well. And go ahead and look at the histogram on the left. You see it's bringing up the whole thing, whereas if I go over to curves and bring up the midtones, I can kind of finesse it and add extra points and be very specific about what I want to bring up and down. All right, and I'm going to go ahead and reset this. And like I said, if I want to see, so I'm seeing all my effects applied to this. So it's really nice. It's really cool that you get this, and you don't have to use all 5. Like obviously Vignette's a very special thing. I'm sure they'll add to this as they go. I mean, Vignette is nice too, and I'll talk about that in the next clip. But it's just nice to have all these in one. You don't have to use them all, but I do use a combination. Like I said, I use the basic for the temperature and a little bit of the contrast, and then I use creative for my sharpening and then my saturation, and then I use curves for contrast and kind of recovering stuff if I need to, but mostly to control contrast, and obviously the hue and saturation to control a little bit of the color balance and isolate certain colors. And then color wheels I use to just correct shots to shots. So if most of my shots have a lot of blue in them, then I'm going to want to pull away from the red in almost every midtone, whatever. And obviously you can see on the left side there that the blue's going up and the red's going down. So that's it for that. Let me go over to the next shot. I'm just going to click over to my editing and find my next one, and this one I have called Filmic. So here's just the original shot. I think they're both set up that way. I'm going to go back into color mode just to make this a little easier. So this one, let's say that I've already color corrected it and I'm recovered any highlights I need. What if I just want to add a look and I just don't have a lot of time? They have these presets, and these are different from the camera presets that I showed before. These are kind of like looks, like Red Giant looks, like I've shown in the past. Let me just click one right here. Let's go with this one. And then let's try a different one. The nice thing about these is I have a feeling that, probably even now you can go, these are all made essentially in Photoshop. I mean, you can make LUTs like these in Photoshop easy. So I'm sure you can look around Google online and find a bunch more pre-made ones, and you can even make your own and then kind of use those across different shots. One thing that I do want to mention though is, let's say you let's do this one. So this one's super aggressive. I mean, it's crushing the blacks. Things are getting blown out. The colors, the red's really overtaking the shot. Let's say I kind of like that look, but it's a little too aggressive for me. You can pull back on the intensity. You're essentially lowering the opacity of the adjustment layer, which is what I talked about in a previous podcast about blending modes. You can see how that's going back and forth, affecting it. Because this one's super aggressive. I mean, you look at this histogram, it's all over, and then you pull back on the intensity a little bit, and it kind of gets a little bit more reasonable. And so you can see that shot. And obviously you can add a little bit of a faded film look if you're going for a film look. I don't know that you can add grain yet. Maybe that's something they'll add in the future. There's other tools to easily do that though. And there was one, and then so I'm making a look right now. I've already colored. Let's say I color balance everything. Vignette is something very nice to add. You can add a vignette, which is adding white, which will correct vignetting that you don't want. Let's say on a lens, like a wide angle lens, or you can take back and kind of get a more artistic looking focus shot, because vignettes are very good at drawing eyes to a certain thing that you want to see. Obviously, maybe it doesn't work for this shot, but and you got the standard features that you'd find in Photoshop or After Effects to kind of fine tune it a little bit. And that's that. And like I said before, hit 0 to see the entire effect being removed all the way. And yeah, that's it. If you have any questions, I want to actually post a blog about this with some more detailed information, some pictures. That's filmin5d.wordpress.com. Check it out. Go ahead and subscribe to that. Check out our podcasts. We're on episode 10 now, coming up on iTunes. Just search Filmin5D. Please rate, comment, and subscribe. And if you got any questions, leave a comment below or hit me up on Twitter at Filmin5D. See you guys next time.